voice coming through in English and in French with simultaneous translation? Can you give me a thumbs up? Fascinating. This is so interesting to me. Just the more you do with Zoom, the more interesting it gets. Anyway, let me share my slides quickly. This is going to be an interactive session because individuals learn best when they interact. And I would love it if as many people as possible could switch on their cameras so that I can see more of some of the responses. Does everybody know how to view that? You can see the slides and the tiles if you have it in gallery view, so that you can see the slides and the other participants. Does everybody know how to use that? I know we do, Haley, because we've lived our lives like that. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you want a question, I like questions as they come through, please. So there's in your reactions, there's a hand raised icon, or you can, if you've got your camera on, please physically wave at me because I've got almost every camera on my screen, which is great. If you're comfortable, if you want to share, obviously your name is there, your 4-letter type preferences. And for me, just for background, it's quite nice if you just speak English. I don't know if we have anybody on who just speaks English, put an E. If you speak English and French, just do an E/I. And if you just speak French, put an F. It's just be useful when we start to divide the groups. And you can rename simply by right-clicking on your camera icon, or you can do it in some of the things at the bottom there. So lovely. I'm just looking around at anybody having trouble renaming. Yeah, good. So we've got some nice diversity in types. All right. Excellent. Any questions before we jump in? All right, so clarifying best fit type. How did this come about? This whole book and process came from, I wrote a series of articles for the Australian Association of Psychological Type. And Phil Kerr, who was the editor of their magazine, called it Let's Split the Difference. And we looked at similar types with just different temperaments. So they had 1-letter difference, but they were different temperaments. And so when I started to work in this area, it seemed like this would be we had so many articles. I think I'd written 16 articles. I said, are you okay if I put them into a book? And that's how Let's Split the Difference and Clarifying Best Fit Type came. I'd love you to put into chat, please, how long have you worked with type? I'm curious as to just the experience in the room. Put into chat, how long have you worked with type? +20 years. Yeah, Jean-Luc, that's right. 4 years, Haley, that's right. 10. Lots of little experience, 4 years, 8 years. It's 2004, 10 years, 20 years, 4 years. Less than 15 years, 20 years, 7 years. Oh, we've got a real cross section here. Very nice. I can at least remember some very simple French from my 5 years at school, but I lost all the, so I can read some of the chat, which I'm very pleased with. And yeah, we don't want to, you need to clear the screen, Lionel, because we've got some writing on it. I want to give you, I want to find out a little bit more about you. And there is a poll. And Lionel, can you launch the poll? And the questions in the poll are on page 2 in just a simple participant guide. So let's have a look. I'm just curious as to knowledge, so to help me position content here. So let's let you complete this poll. And Lionel, do you know how to clear the screen to get that writing off the screen?
Which writing?
I'm seeing ESFJ FR on the screen. Are you seeing that at the bottom left-hand side of the screen?
Yes, I see it, but I don't know where it
comes. I think it came from annotate. Let me look if I can go under annotate for a minute and see.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, it's an annotation, but.
Yeah, and let's take that off.
Annotation.
It should be in view options, but I don't have view options at the moment. And oh, wait a minute, let's have a look at annotate. Clear all drawings.
Or is it a whiteboard?
Got it.
Oh,
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, how are we doing with our poll?
We have 19 answers out of 24 participants. You don't see the results, right?
Would you like to, it's always nice to hear a different voice. Would you like to read it to me so that I can write notes at the same time?
Okay, so first question, how familiar are you with temperaments? We have 5% answered not at all, 11% have only read chapter 3, 63% have used it somewhat, and 20%, the percentage are moving, have used it a lot.
Perfect, thank you.
So it means that 80% have used it somewhat or a lot.
Thank you.
Question, how familiar are you with interaction style? 43% not at all, 14% have only read chapter 3, and 38% have used it somewhat, 5% used it a lot. So that's 43% who have used it a little bit or a lot. And finally, function attitudes or cognitive processes, 19% not at all, 14% have just read chapter 3, and 33% have used it somewhat, 33% have used it a lot. So that's 63% who have used it a little or a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lionel. So what it looks like is that we've got a lot more cumulative experience in what we call the cognitive processes and relatively less in temperament and interaction style. Thank you for doing that. That's really helpful for me. So what are we going to be covering today? And your agenda is on page 2 in your participant guide. We're going to be looking at clues for recognizing temperament, because that's really helpful in clarifying best fit type. Clues for recognizing interaction style. I'm not actually going to have time in this 2 hours to do the overview of cognitive processes, but there's a lot of that is in chapter 3. And then we're going to do some activities on clarifying type differences and looking at key insights. So who would like, the quote is at the top of page 3, and who would like to read the quote for me, please? So we get different voices apart from mine. Who'd like to read the quote for me? And you can raise your hand physically or use the reactions to raise your hand. Who'd like to just read the quote? But thank you, Haley, go for it. You know this is what we do.
Best fit type means that the themes and preferred processes of the type seem to fit you the best. Adapted from Linda Behrens and Dario Nardi in 1999. Thank
you very much, Haley and Dario Nardi. I think you've had a session from Dario. Linda Behrens articulated the theory of interaction styles and has worked with temperament for quite a long time. And so I learned from Linda Behrens, and Dario Nardi was in my first qualification session with Linda Behrens, which was, scarily enough, 30 years ago. So I'd like you to think about and put your answers in chat, please, and I may need some translation help here. Firstly, what do you see as the challenges when an individual has confusion about his or her best fit type? And if anybody wants to answer verbally, I'd love to hear a verbal answer. And I'd also love some answers in chat too. I mean, what are the challenges? I mean, why should we worry about it? Lack of self-knowledge. Thank you, Jean-Luc. What are the challenges? I mean, why bother? Desirability. Sylvie, tell me what you mean by desirability. You need to just unmute.
It's the fact that sometimes people want to be a certain kind of people, or like to be this type, or and then they try to go to this type instead of their real ones.
Thank you. That's exactly right. I was talking, and Antoine, you might identify with this, with someone, and I've had groups where they all say, well, our preferences are ENTJ. We've all assessed, our whole executive team has assessed ENTJ. And actually that's because their leader was ENTJ and they thought ENTJ was quite a good type to be in the business that they were in. So it doesn't quite work if that happens. You can't work on type development. We're going to look at how to find the best questions to help Fabrice. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at. And who'd like to translate it's you lose the function and it helps the situation. What's the French one from Antoine? Could someone read that for me so I can get it translated?
Trouver sa fonction inférieure à l'aide d'une situation conflictuelle, d'un contre-type, d'une projection de l'ombre.
Oui, bonjour, je peux peut-être...
Thank you. So if you're trying to get to that inferior function, or if you're using the cognitive processes, it ends up having inaccurate data and therefore is irrelevant. Extreme adaptation, understanding how to communicate with others, how to act or behave. Exactly. So there's my biggest concern with people not clarifying their best fit type. I think it discredits the whole theory, because there's nothing more disturbing, I think, than someone says, well, I'm a di-da. And really we should be saying, I have preferences for di-da, because we are far more than a static object and noun. I have preferences for, and then you watch their behavior and you think, I'm not seeing any clues for that behavior at all. Now it might be adapted style, absolutely. And if it's incorrect, then someone says, well, you think you're this, and I think I'm the same, but we are totally different and we disagree all the time. So it discredits the theory. And I think the theory is so resilient, and having studied it for over 30 years, I hate to discredit the theory. So let me ask the second question. What are the benefits then if we really work with people clarifying and identifying best fit type? Put some of these ideas into chat. Or if anyone wants to answer verbally, that's also good. Benefits. Customer satisfaction. Yes, there's something really rewarding when you finally think, oh, that's who I am. Yes. Avoiding that they adapt situation, action plans that increase their difficulties. Tell you what you mean by your comment, Jean-Luc.
Basically, let's imagine that I'm an INFP and I would project myself as being an ESTP. I may take decisions that increase the fact that I'm putting myself under pressure by trying to be someone that basically I'm not, and putting myself more and more into my effort zone. Thank
you. That if you're trying to act like a type that's not your core type, it takes a lot more energy, and I think causes stress. I worked with someone many years ago who had always assessed as ESTJ, preferences for ESTJ, and was in the military, when we went through the lens of temperament and interaction style, he ended up thinking his best fit type was actually ESFP, which was a different temperament, a different interaction style, and very different cognitive processes. Now, I'm not saying this is cause and effect, but he died of a heart attack at 45 and constantly stretching to be something you're not, and not being comfortable with who you are can be quite traumatic, I think. You can have type development coaching sessions. You can explore stress reactions and resources to manage it. We're more aware of the ego process. Very, very nice. And there's Angelina Bennett's work on ego development is really worth tapping into if you haven't already. Improved understanding, and it allows more room to build relationships. Thank you. Yes, one of the, let me see, was it the third book that I wrote about type was called Dating, Mating, and Relating. And it was all about personality type in relationships, because when I cover this content, the first thing people say is, particularly when they're younger, who should I be with? Who is my best fit type? And the summary of the book in a sentence: anyone can be with anyone as long as you're committed to a lifetime of hard work and value the differences between you. Actually celebrate the differences between you. So why best fit type? Self-awareness, gives a firm foundation, which you talked about, to get that development plan. You talked a bit about that. Reinforces the validity. And we've also talked about understanding relationships and improving communication. And the other thing I've observed is higher buy-in, because people really feel at home with how they've landed versus trying to stretch to do something different. And therefore greater client motivation to act on this knowledge. And I put that list, did I put that list at the back for you? I did. I put that list at the back on page 14 for you. So I use the 3 lenses of type, particularly in clarifying best fit type, because you're able to triangulate. And what we're going to do is I'm going to guide you through a process where we look at temperament, we look at interaction style, and you can then identify a 4-letter type code without ever talking about the preferences. What benefits do you think there might be to talking about the patterns of temperament and the patterns of interaction style? So 4 to 4 gives you 16. What's the benefits of doing this without using the preference letters, E, I, S, N, T, F, and JP, do you think? What's the benefits of looking through those 2 lenses without looking at the letters, do you think? It is easier to remember, Sylvie. People, thank you so much. When I say to people, oh, who's done the Myers-Briggs type indicator before, if that's the tool they're using, and they go, oh, yeah. And what are your preferences? Not E, P, and they don't remember. When we go through the lens of temperament interaction style, they remember. More clarity for the clients. And thank you, Jean-Luc, there's less stereotyping. And because they're patterns, not preferences, it's much easier to stop labeling. Oh, if I'm an E, I can't be an I. Yes, actually, you live in both worlds. So this avoids some of the labeling. And Sylvie, would you like to read the comment from Virginia so we can get that translated for me too, please?
Quand on n'a pas encore l'habitude, c'est plus facile que ces lettres qui sont confusantes, notamment en français.
Very nice. Thank you. I almost could read that. I could almost understand that. The French is coming back moment by moment. It's lovely. So that's why I decided to focus on temperament and interaction style. And Haley, as one of our clients, has been through this process of temperament and interaction style to type. So we rarely look at cognitive processes that we use as a follow-up lens. So recognizing temperament. And the most important thing, I believe, is the definition of temperament. And it is in your, on page 33, if you wanted to look at this, it's the most important thing, is temperament, and it's in that time out, because the definitions in that split the difference are in time out. Temperament can be defined as a pattern of needs, values, talents, and behaviors that underlies our way of acting and being in the world. What are some of those key words in that definition? Hopefully you've all got chapter 3 to hand here, because it'll be very useful in this. What are some key words in that definition? Pattern of needs, values, talents, and behaviors that underlies our way of acting and being in the world. Any thoughts on key words? Anyone like to share what they think are the key words from that definition, if it's in front of them?
Pattern?
Yes, yes. Others, yes. What else? And it's the needs. Thank you very much. I'm trying to think. Yeah, at the end of that chapter, it would be worth looking at page 53 afterwards, because I've used the iceberg method. Your temperament core needs. Many people think temperament is a combination of preferences, and then they get upset because it's an illogical grouping of preferences. So improvisers share the preferences for sensing and perceiving, stabilizers sensing and judging, catalysts intuiting and feeling, and theorists intuiting and thinking. Well, why isn't it the same grouping of letters? Because it's a different theory. Kierce, Myers and Briggs, as you know, created the initial theory of and tried to make Jung's theory of psychological types more accessible, particularly after the Second World War, looking at job selection. David Kiersey was working on this content, and he started looking at the temperament patterns that have been around for 25 centuries. And he was the one who said, I see that there's a correlation between the temperaments he described as artisan, guardian, rational, and idealist. There's a between certain preference pairings, but it is a separate theory. And this information is, by the way, in your participant guide. So there's no need to frantically photograph it or write it down. It is in your participant guide on page 4. And so these, I picked out just what I think are the key words and sentences that resonate for each of the 4 temperaments. And I think for those of you who have the participant guide, it has been translated into French. So this is at the top of page 4. The words catalyst, improviser, stabilizer, and theorist are the words that Linda Behrens decided to use. She'd used artisan, guardian, rational, and idealist initially. And then she discovered that when it came to artisan, people thought it was about making pots, physical stuff. Rational was everybody else, irrational. An idealist felt like a completely unrealistic sort of, I call it pink fluffy jumper. So she said, I want words, being a theorist herself with preferences for INTP, I want a word that is a noun and also a verb. So we get some idea of the inside and some of the outside behaviors. Hence, improviser, stabilizer, theorist, and catalyst. And I've got a few comments in chat, Sylvie. There's two that it's easier than the letters, and Lionel's comment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just telling him that they can look
Yeah,
directly in
yeah.
the participant guide. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay, good. So as you're looking at those comments, looking at your type preferences, what statements resonate for you when you look at those descriptions of temperament? If you could put some of those ideas into chat, or if you're willing to share them, I'm really curious. The most important element are needs, because when we don't get our core needs met, we might tend to go into a stress response. And in the chapter I shared with you, I shared some of the stress responses from Temperament. And Yves Delunas's book, Survival Games, Personalities Play, is an absolute must. I understood my whole family better from her book, Survival Games, Personalities Play. Again, I think it's only in English. This is a great question. What is the impact of individuation process on temperament expression? What an excellent question. And I'm going to give an answer, and I'll also reflect on it. Thank you for asking, Fabrice. I think the individuation happens separately as we work through, we try and develop our cognitive processes. As we are becoming more individuated, I think we become more self-aware. And what I've observed is we're able to flex more easily then to different temperaments and different interaction styles, because we are more rounded, is how I see it. Did that make sense? Great question. Thank you. Oh yeah, you got a great conference by Carmel. You're welcome. Yeah, Carmel's excellent. Thank you. Talent coming from temperaments can be confusing with type, but the notion of needs is definitely a plus to understanding one's own type. Yes, because, and I'm sure Dario talked about this, when we are passionate about a subject, we often can develop a talent in it. So for instance, musical talent, that's not limited to just improvisers who have a tactical talent. Anyone could develop that talent depending on their passion for the subject. So the needs is interesting, and we may not be aware of our needs until they're not being met, and then we catch ourselves having this stress response. So I'd like to do an activity, and there are 4 case studies on page 5 in your participant guide. And I mean, I'm just blown away by how you've been able to translate this. Thank you. I'd like you to think based on the information that we've discussed, and also particularly the table on pages 36, 37 and 38 may help you with this. Which temperament is represented and why? I want at least 5 clues for each temperament. These are people who are friends of mine and that I've worked with for a long time. So these are genuine behaviors. 5 clues means that you're creating a hypothesis about best fit type. Less than 5 is labeling. So And when all we can do is make a hypothesis and actually know these people, so I feel justified in using them for this activity. 5 clues, and you're going to have 10 minutes for this activity. So Lionel, have you divided people into groups of 5, into teams of 5? And we'll be staying in these same groups multiple times.
Lionel, t'as pas dû désactiver ton micro. Je vois tes lèvres bouger.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying that I'm going to create 5 rooms for 5 people.
Breakout rooms, yeah.
I need to, or maybe, do we leave people, we put them randomly or manually? Because how many people are not comfortable with English? Some didn't answer. Okay, it looks like most people.
Do we have only English speakers or not? I think.
I'm hearing it in French right now. So there's one group with English speakers, and then we've got.
Yeah, because by the way, I think everybody is able to speak French, so we don't have to take care. Ah.
Okay, Antoine not comfortable in English. So some people are not comfortable in English, and I guess.
Now let me go back.
Everybody is comfortable in French, so then it's easy.
So, okay, so I do a random thing. If you find yourself with the participant named French recording session, don't be surprised. It's just a separate computer to record the French version of the conference, but that participant is virtual and will not participate. Okay, so I create, and how much? 10 minutes. Okay.
10 minutes, and make sure you pick one person to report out your ideas, please.
Okay, so options, I will put 10 minutes. Okay, autoriser les participants, choisir, okay. Okay, let's start and see how that works.
You can always come back to the main room, and we can always move you into another room if you end up in the room that you'd rather not be in.
Yeah, you can move around in case you don't like your you don't like your colleagues.
How easy was it to do that exercise? Thumbs up, middle, thumbs down. Easy? Easy, good. So what do we think about Teresa? Which was her best fit temperament? And if you want to pop your idea into chat, or if someone wants to raise their hand, that would be great. Who'd like to share? Or are we going to put it into chat? Rational, yes. How many of you had rational or theorist down? Just give me a thumbs up. And what were the clues that you had? Who'd like to just read the clues for me? Yeah, and you can use NT, rational or NT. I try to use names only because it captures the idea that it's a pattern, not a combination of preferences. Who'd like to share the clues?
A few things related to, we see a lot of intuition in that, but there are also things related to the temperament. Like the temperament is the need for mastery, the fact that she used different coaching methodology, the boundaries between her accountability and that of the client, intellectual independence. So there are a few things about intuition, but in this one, there were a few specifics about temperament.
Thank you. So there were some links with intuition, but the need for mastery, learning methodologies, all of those came up. And here are the clues that are related to temperament. Now, these are listed in the back of your participant guide, so you don't have to take a photograph of them. They are on page 14. You can now add the temperament next to it if that will help. Let me just move my, sometimes the chat comes up on there. Is that better? Perfect. So those are some critical clues for theorist temperament. So critical questioning is an important one, mastery, and there is obviously a high correlation between intuition and thinking because there's strategy, leading edge, intellectual independence. All of those are critical things. So if you wanted to write next to Teresa, theorist on that page, that would work. What about Michael? What temperament do we think was the best fit for Michael? Oh, why this animal? Okay, so on the Type Academy website, typeacademy.com, Kiersey captured that an animal as a metaphor for each temperament. And on the Type Academy website, there's a description, and he thought the owl, because big picture, high up in trees, hang up and then swoop down. So big picture to detail to big picture, independent. There's a whole list there of why he picked the owl on typeacademy.com. If you can't find it for some reason, then let Lionel know and I'll send it to you as a handout. So when I work with clients, I use the animals first with the descriptors and then the case studies so that we get the high level patterns and then the more specific business behaviors. So thank you, Sylvie. Yes. And if you can't find it on typeacademy.com, I'll happy to send it to you afterwards. What about for Michael? What did we think was our best fit temperament for Michael? Who'd like to put their idea? Catalyst, exactly right. Haley, what were some clues you thought for catalyst?
That Michael likes to work with people and develop and help them develop. For example, words like genuine, empathy.
Yep, work with people, genuine, empathy. Again, similar list. High empathy. Empathy is a key attribute of the catalyst temperament. And these, you know, you might cover some of it, a little bit of it with something like extroverted feeling, but it's a much more complete than that. Genuine, authentic, probably the best at giving positive feedback, catalyst, and need lots of positive feedback. And compassionate questioning, the ability to ask questions to help people reveal themselves without being confrontational is one of the catalyst gifts. What about Tony, who'd like to just drop into chat which temperament we thought was the best fit for Tony? Thank you very much, Fabrice. You found it. Good job. And he picked the dolphin because of empathy. Each dolphin has a unique name, so there's a unique identity. They use collaborative decision making. There's a whole lot of reasons why he picked the dolphin. Yeah. All right, let's have a look. Yes, Stephanie, yes, he is an improviser extraordinaire is Tony, and you'll see him in the interaction styles. And here's the clues for Tony as an improviser. And Kiersey talked about the fox, because foxes are really aware in the moment. They pick up their sensory, really acute sensory situation, and they are very flexible and adaptable. And obviously most artisans use extroverted sensing as a dominant or auxiliary function. And is it always, can you just clarify, is it, I lost the last word, Stephanie, is it all
fun?
Is it always fun? Yes, funny. Yes, I think so. There's a sense of fun, playfulness. Yeah, there is. So, and tend to use more informal language. Yeah, he believes so. That's right. And so that obviously leaves Sharon as our stabilizer, because there was one of each. So again, all the clues are in the back. And he picked the beaver. And when you think about it, busy like a beaver, live in multi-generational family structures. The beaver with the most experience is the most senior. They make the dam in the same way every time, so they're very good at repeatable processes. So the animals are a great way of picking up some of those patterns and themes. So all of these, if you want to make sure you write it, are clues to help differentiate one temperament from another. Particularly, all stabilizers use introverted sensing, or what I call recalling, either as a dominant or auxiliary function. So they are going to be able to remember details from previous sessions. You know, in the past, this is what we did, comparing and contrasting. So there's some correlation with sensing and intuiting, and I deliberately use but here, but the patterns of temperament are broader. And I have found that when you use temperament and people find themselves, it's relatively easy to self-assess temperament in those patterns. When I first did my first type assessment, they said, well, you're either ESFJ or ENFJ. And so that was not terribly helpful. As soon as I met Linda Behrens and she described the idealist or the catalyst in that terms, it was like, oh, there I am. It was crystal clear to me. So using any questions before we jump in and have a quick look at interaction styles. So I look through the temperament lens. Then what I do is I look through the lens of interaction style. And I saw that 66% of you have had little exposure to interaction style. And the best definition of interaction style is on page 45 in the big handout. Because interaction style is all about how you naturally engage with others to get your needs met. So temperament is why, interaction style is how, and they're very different. And the definition is an innate pattern. So again, it's a pattern of physical drives, mental aims and beliefs and talents combined with outward behaviors. And one of the things I have noticed with interaction style is this is harder to self-assess, but other people pick it up more easily because there is a physical evidence. There's a way you move. There's an energy that goes with that. And I mean, at some point, I'm very happy to do an in-depth session on interaction styles, if that would be useful. Or Catherine Stothard has also written a very good book on interaction action styles called How to Get On With Anyone. It's a really valuable lens because while I love cognitive processes, they're how we think about things. And you can learn to develop some of those cognitive processes that may be lower down in your hierarchy. I mean, I've learned to use introverted thinking reasonably well because I do a lot of course design, and course design has a lot of introverted thinking in it. But that's not my core, whereas I know what my core is with interaction style. Once I found it, it's quite unmistakable. And my husband certainly reinforces my interaction style energy almost every day when we're interacting, because I have an in charge energy and he has a behind the scenes energy, and they are quite different. Still, we've managed 47 years together, so I think we've managed to work around it. But the temperament connections have been very helpful in that relationship, which is catalyst and stabilizer, because of the loyalty and relationship focus. So, and this is also in your participant guide on page 7. So it's been translated there. And the thing that I pick up most is the drive. That in charge has a drive, that urgent need to accomplish, if you're one of those people who sees an email and thinks, I have to answer it right now, that could, except when Derek watches a soccer match, that's right. And it's that wanting to get things done quickly, very quickly, and it's worth the risk to decide. And often you see quick decisions. With get things going, and you see on the left-hand side, they both have the extroverting preference. There's that urgent need to involve everyone and get them to want to do something. And you can see it, there'll be the social interaction, the reaching out, the chatting, pulling people in to get buy-in. And that's associated with collaborative decisions. Then the two on the right-hand side, Linda calls it initiating, so taking the first move in relationships, on the right-hand side, responding, which is not quite the same as introversion, but it happens to correlate with the introverting preference. So chart the course. Pressing is the there's a pressing need to think things through. What are the obstacles that I might face? What is the process to achieve the goal? That chart the course is driven to do that. When you think of when we used to have navigation systems, now they do it pretty quickly in the car, but it's like recalculating. That's what chart the course does. You change, they have to rethink things through. Behind the scenes is all about let's connect and reconcile to get the best quality result, the best quality result. So in charge is an attainable result. And this is, by the way, on your, it will be in the handout. I'll find it specific. Attainable, is it doable for in charge? Get things going, is it embraced? Does everybody buy into it? Chart the course, is it the expected goal? And behind the scenes, is it the best goal possible? So looking at those descriptions in high level, again, what statements resonate for you, or what questions do you have on interaction style? Feel free to raise your hand or put your ideas into chat.
Suzanne, vous avez évoqué des comportements physiques différents. Quels seraient-ils?
So you're asking for what are the physical differences?
Yeah.
So the physical, yes. So the physical differences. Okay, if you look on YouTube, and there are a series of videos called "Walk This Way." And Andy Cole, who did a lot of work with interaction styles, combined interaction styles with Van Laben's theory of movement. And this Walk This Way is a series of, I did it at the International Association of Psychological Type quite a few years ago. And one of the activities I do is I walk into the room using the 4 different energies. And so I ask people to look for the physical clues, and then I describe them. So have a look and see if you can find that. And it may even be on our website, actually. It's probably on our website somewhere. So rather than me describing it in detail, that you can actually see them there, you know, in charge, looks like you're walking quickly. Someone said to me one time when I was walking to the restroom, oh, I didn't realize you were in a hurry. I wasn't in a hurry. I was just walking. Well done. You found it there. Thank you very much. For chart the course, there's a lightness and it's very methodical, and they pause, get things going. Bouncing is the overwhelming thing I see. Bouncing, there's an energy there. And with behind the scenes, there's I'm going to think about everything before I make a move. And it's wrongly labeled sometimes as hesitant or unsure, and it's absolutely not that. It is, I'm going to gather the relevant data before I make a move. So great question, why these letter associations? Linda was doing some research because she said everything wasn't matching with temperaments or the cognitive processes. So she started to look at Marston's emotions of normal people, I think, and a DISC came from that, social styles came from that. So if you're familiar with DISC or social styles, and what she said is DISC was all about external. And she picked up that there were some internal drives that weren't being recognized by DISC. And so when she looked for the patterns, it happened to be that really illogical grouping of letters. I mean, it's worse than temperament from that perspective. So get things going is always ESF. So that's ESFP, ESFJ, ENTP, and ENFP. In charge is always EST, so ESTP, ESTJ, and then ENJ, so ENFJ, ENTJ. And I'm happy to send this afterwards if you'd like that written down. Behind the scenes is always ISF, so you get ISFJ, ISFP, an INP, which is INTP, INFP, and chart the course is always IST, so ISTJ, ISTP, and INJ, which is INTJ and INFJ. And so each interaction style has a mixture between thinking and feeling, and a mixture between sensing and intuiting, and it gives you a context that type without interaction style lacks. Yes, there is. Is there a document comparing interaction styles and DISC? The best one I can think of is Linda Behrens wrote a red booklet called Understanding Yourself and Others. It's a red book, Introduction to Interaction Style 2.0. And there's a page in there about that. And it's also clear visually on the chart on page 52 in my book. Thank you, Fabrice. You know my book, I think, better than I do now, which is great. So let's just, based on this data, and there are tables for let's split the difference on pages sort of 46, 47, 48, 49, and 50. Let's try a similar activities with the interaction styles in the, 4 times 4 squares, that's right. Which interaction style is represented by each person and why? So again, I'd like to go into the same breakout rooms for 10 minutes. The case studies are on pages 8 and 9 in your participant guide. Sorry, you've got 2 documents. And what are the things I observed? If you don't have the handout, you can, in your breakout room, share your screen. So if one of you has the handout, you can share your screen, because Zoom now allows sharing of screens in breakout rooms. So let's just see how you get on. And when you come back, I will just simply share which is which, and then we can answer questions. The plan, often stressful changing the plan at the last minute. Any questions on, it is really interesting. Any questions on Teresa particularly? Yes, for individual type discovery, it seems really easy to use. How is it working for groups? Haley, would you mind if I put you on the spot, because you were part of a group that went through, we go through a temperament assessment, self-assessment, which is half a day, and interaction styles half a day. And then we do a day 2 of application. As a participant, would you mind explaining how it was for you working in a group with it?
Thank you, Susan, for putting me on the spot.
But honestly, when you haven't had time to map it out, right?
Exactly. I am a chart the course, so I would have need anticipation to respond to this question, but in all honesty, as someone that, so I used to work for a company that was a client of Susan's, and it's a retail company. So for retail, there was a great progression into understanding both temperament and interaction styles in a deeper way. So especially for me as a client at the time, and not so familiar with Jung, for example, this was a great way that was able to be more understandable in terms of learning, and also in a group setting. It worked extremely well. I believe we were maybe about 25 people, just about. So it worked really well. And taking it step by step.
Taking it step by step, and it's a very experiential journey using, I look at the preferences and then case studies and cards. So, and shapes, it actually...
Shapes as well.
Shapes, thank you, the shapes as well, thank you. And there's a benefit in doing it in a group, because someone will say, oh, well, I think I'm get things going, for instance, which is a very common thing that anyone with preferences for ENFJ would say. And then you are with the other get things going and you think, no, that's not me. That's not me. So it's really, I have never had a time when these two lenses together have not really landed and resonated with a group, which is why I ended up focusing on these two lenses and then building in type and cognitive processes afterwards. So,
and what's great about the group setting is that you can kind of you can really see what your opposite would look like, and you can kind of understand why sometimes a certain interaction style may not have matched, for example, in the beginning of the session. So it was really telling some of the breakout groups that we had done as well.
Thank you. Yeah, being able to see, particularly the ones that are diagonally in charge to behind the scenes and chart the course to get things going, are the more difficult interactions. So it really helps to see those in action. Then we had Michael, who was behind the scenes. Did you get Michael as behind the scenes? Yeah, getting some good nodding there. Again, the approachable energy is one of the real clues I find for behind the scenes. My husband, as I say, has a behind the scenes energy, and he gets off a plane if we're traveling separately, and he knows everything about the person sitting next door to him, because the person, it's just a comfortable energy to talk to. I get off the plane, and my in charge energy, I send out a vibe that says, do not talk to me, because I just want to travel and be there and not talk to anyone. So no one talks to me. So the approachable energy is really important with our behind the scenes. People often will say that behind the scenes have lots of people just talking to them. Then the reason I called Tony the improviser's improviser is Tony has an in charge energy. How many of you picked up the in charge energy? Yes, and for if you get in charge, in the moment, let's act, and then you combine it with that improviser temperament. This is quick moving, quick thinking, in the moment, everything's doable, multiplexing. So, so it says didn't work out as planned, stressed when nothing happens, can appear impatient, and finishes other sentences. So these are some good clues. And as I say, they are in your participant guide. Huge thank you for the translation on page 15. So all you need to do is add the energy. And that leaves Sharon as our get things going. So again, worth the time to engage the team, moving that expressive energy, and can get stressed if individuals appear switched off. Any other questions or observations about?
I see that Catherine raised her virtual hand.
Okay, can you speak, Catherine, then? Or was that to say you've done it? Because I know you're on a train, aren't you? I think it might have been the hand raised for the selection, Lionel.
Okay.
If there's anything, Catherine, put it in chat, please, and we can pick it up.
Sure.
sorry. So this is how it combines. And when I'm working with clients, so Teresa, chart the course theorist, I just say to the group, what type is she? And they go, INTJ. I say, Tony is an in-charge improviser. What is his 4-letter type code? ESTP. Michael is a behind-the-scenes catalyst. What's his type code? INFP. And Sharon is a get things going stabilizer. What type is she? ESFJ. I do give, you can imagine, a very thorough participant guide that has the definitions of the preferences in the appendix if people want to know that. And I don't think I have it. And the type description booklet I use, which I know is available in French, is a booklet called You've Got Personality, which are the best type descriptions I found anywhere in the world. Mary McGuinness, who wrote the booklet, interviewed over 1,000 people of each type. She used to run qualification programs in Australia. It's called You've Got Personality. It's available in multiple languages. So highly recommend it. It includes temperament and cognitive processes. It does not include interaction style. But what I do is I get people to read type descriptions to then validate type. So for instance, if Tony was, I'm not sure if I'm a get things going or in charge, I'd say, well, read ESFP or ESTP. So they read type descriptions to validate. It does exist in French. Yes. Yes. So, Catherine, it was just the wrong movement on the train. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now, and hopefully we'll have time to do this, is we're going to try and use this information to help differentiate between two types. As you know, I've got 16 or 18 versions of this, but I picked two that I find are very common, and they're different temperaments, different interaction styles. So we're diversity. So I'm going to ask, it ended up by being, we just had 4 teams. So team 1 and team 2, I would like you to focus on, God, my mouse is so sensitive today. Come on, click. I would like you to look at differentiating between ISTP and INTP. I find these get confused a lot. So if you're in team 1 or team 2, it's ISTP from INTP. And the reason is, and I've included the similarities and differences for you on page 11 in your participant guide. And these are the way I map type. So I map the hierarchy of processes, the temperament and the interaction style. And obviously the overlapping of the Venn diagram is where they all correlate. So similarities, they both lead with introverted thinking. So that causes a lot of confusion. They're both pragmatic because improvisers and theorists are the pragmatic, not practical. Pragmatic is doing what it takes or what needs to be done. They both value competence, and then simplistically looking through the lens, they both have an introverting preference and a perceiving preference. And they both tend to ask critical questions, which can come from introverted thinking. Here are the differences. So you've got an improviser versus a theorist. You've got chart the course versus behind the scenes. You've got the parent, which is the auxiliary function extroverted sensing versus the auxiliary function extroverted intuiting. And you've got your third or your tertiary, which I call the child function, as did John Beebe, of introverted intuiting versus introverted sensing. So they're actually quite different. So when you get in your teams, I'd like you to try and work out what questions might you ask, or what differences, how might you differentiate and select which is which? teams 3 and 4, these are another very common misconception, is ESFJ and ENFJ. So that will be teams 3 and 4. They're very similar, and this is on page 12, because they both lead with harmonizing or extroverted feeling. Both tend to be collaborative with a people focus, and then simplistically extroverting and judging. When we look at the differences, we have a different temperament. We have a different energy. We have a different auxiliary function. So we've got stabilizer versus catalyst, get things going versus in charge, introverted sensing versus introverted intuiting. And again, your third function, which is extroverted intuiting versus extroverted sensing. And there's another lens in interaction style, which is informing, which is get things going, tends to make statements or observations, versus in charge tends to be more directive, which is do this by giving more instructions. So let's see, are you okay if we spend 10 minutes on this? And then we come back, and rather than ask you to report out, I will share some of the differences that I've had, but I want you to go through that thought process to practice applying the ideas. Any questions on the activity? So it'd be clues that you might look for or questions you might ask. So for instance, stabilizer versus catalyst, are they more practical or are they more in the idea space? So just little things like that. So over to you, and 10 minutes, and then we'll come back at 55 minutes past the hour. And if you need any help, there is what we call a room service button. You can call for help if you want me to jump in at any point. So enjoy, and then we'll talk a little bit more when we come back. Looks like people are typing difficult, not too easy. Yes, indeed. Indeed. It's hard to have people find their best fit type. It really is. So here are some of my ideas I'm happy to share afterwards. Now, we're probably going to run about 5 or 10 minutes late, so apologies for that. If I will send the slides afterwards. So one big difference between improvisers and theorists is improvisers tend to be in the now moment, whereas theorists have infinite time orientation. So you could, if you ask what's a long-term plan and they say, oh, 3 weeks, you're probably talking to more of an improviser than you are a theorist. And be careful, because it's only ever a hypothesis. So the sensing preference tends to use more concrete language. It seems to be more literal and with examples. Theorists tend to use more abstract language, so more metaphors, more figurative. So listen for the language. And what do they like to do? Are they hands-on? Do you see them wanting to get to touch things? Particularly for improvisers, they love to activate their extroverted sensing by touching things. Or is there more of an interest in the models and the theory? And this is a tough one. So because we haven't described this, although it's in chapter 4, or I don't think I covered it a lot in Let's Split the Difference, but it's in contextual coaching. Directing, as I say, is more time and task focused. So do they tend to be more explicit? Do they need to tend to tell you what to do? Or do they tend to make statements, which is what an INTP might do? And you might think, if I'm directing, so inform me. I'm like, does someone want, do I have to do something here? So make an observation, make a statement to get more input and buy-in. Listen to the drive. You'll hear improvisers, they need the freedom to make their own choices versus that need to be competent. And it sounds quite different. If you put an improviser, how do you feel about lots and lots of rigid structure? You'll get more of a response probably from our improvisers than our theorists, because the theorists want freedom to explore their own ideas, but not quite that physical freedom. The stress response can be really clear. If you hear the word, I'm so bored, and they start to maybe, oh God, if I can't get any positive attention, I'm going to get negative attention. That could be your improviser. Whereas INTP is just going to switch off. If they think someone's incompetent, they're gone. And because competence is the number one thing for our theorists. Again, hands-on, tactical versus big picture. And you will hear ISTPs say, I know how to solve that problem in the moment. Because that's their introverted intuiting further down in that child function. Versus you will hear INTPs talk about what happened in the past, because it's there supporting it. So I often hear ENTPs and INTPs talk about the past because it's their introverted sensing. And if they've got good individuation, that's their way of grounding their extroverted intuiting. Any questions about ISTP and INTP, looking at those? And obviously in the chapter on it, Let's Split the Difference, there's a lot.
J'ai une question juste qui m'a surprise quand vous avez indiqué que le point commun entre les deux, c'était le pragmatisme, et vous le définissiez comme atteindre son objectif. Or, pour moi, l'INTP, il est loin en général de l'objectif concret. Enfin, c'est comme ça que moi je l'entends, objectif. Concret, il est plus dans sa pensée, justement dans ses idées, etc., et beaucoup moins dans la réalisation, atteindre son objectif qu'il se serait donné, au moins là-dedans, pour moi.
So I'm sorry, I'm not getting the interpretation there. Hang on. Sorry, it's somehow switched off. Can you say that again? Let me just check with the interpretation now.
Yeah, when we go to breakout rooms and come back, it loses the interpretation. You have to reconfigure it every time. And so past question was about INTP. You said that both are pragmatic, and she thinks that pragmatic INTPs are not so pragmatic. They have ideas, but do not necessarily act. If I understood well.
Yeah, thank you. Pragmatism is more about responding to the needs of the moment. It's like being realistic. So they won't waste time on unnecessary things. So it's slightly different from when they're caught up in their extroverted intuiting. And I'll see if I can find the detailed description. It is much more, there's no point in doing this, so they won't do it. And something will, and that's what pragmatism is. So at times, if it's not in their field of, if it's not something they're interested in, they'll just be, I'm not interested in that, so I'm not going to do it. So both types share the same thing. Does that help, Pascal, or not?
Je suis pas convaincue, en fait. Je suis pas convaincue.
She's not
in the interest of time, yeah. No, and it's one of the most common words that needs some clarification. My commitment is I'll find more about it for you, Pascal, and I'll send it on to Leah now. How's that?
Une question de vocable. Merci en tout cas.
I think so. Yes. Thank you for that. All right. ESFJ and ENFJ. The past versus the future time orientation is quite obvious here. You know, when you ask someone, you know, how do you feel about starting something for the first time with a blank sheet of paper? More often our stabilizers will say, well, I struggle with a blank sheet of paper. I probably prefer to take what I've done and improve it. Whereas for a catalyst, a blank sheet of paper seems to be, for ENFJ, a good place to start. Again, the concrete versus the abstract language. With, you'll always hear our lovely stabilizers talk about, well, let me give you an example of that. This is what I did last time. And it's really helpful because it brings context to life. For ENFJs, they're going to talk more in metaphors. And again, informing versus directing. This is a lens that I'd love to spend more time with you on because it really causes a lot of conflict in relationships. If someone makes a statement and you have a directing style, you think, are you being manipulative? Do you expect me to do something with this? Whereas if you have an informing preference and someone uses a directing style, you'll say, please don't tell me what to do. Please don't be bossy. So it causes, and believe me, I hear this with my husband and myself, at least once a day. And then I think for our stabilizers, the membership and belonging in a team is pivotal. For our catalysts, it's more of a series of one-on-one relationships. So it's not so much about the team. It's about, well, this is a person I value. 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 It doesn't mean they don't value a team, but it's the individual relationships that contribute to the team versus for ESFJs, it's much more the belonging. And that drive for responsibility, you will hear the need to, if someone isn't doing something, our stabilizers will step in and fill the gap. And you can't ask a stabilizer to be irresponsible. Whereas for an ENFJ, they will step into that, but they're more going to be driven by that sense of purpose. Yeah, sorry, I know we've lost, court versus head. Yes, heart versus head. So stress by being overloaded, because when they take on responsibility, our stabilizers tend to get overloaded and their stress response tends to be sick, worried, tired, and depressed. For our catalysts, they tend to be stressed by betrayal, by a key person or a loss of identity, in which case they're more likely to disconnect or disengage and become inauthentic. Grounded in reality again versus insights with the big picture. Biggest benefit of being married to my ISFJ husband is him saying to me, how is this going to be practical at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning when it's raining in Italy? I don't know why it's raining in Italy is in there, but it's all about practical. And he grounds me in reality and I ground him in possibilities, or elevate him in possibilities. And sort of more playful patterns and meanings for our ESFJ. So they can play an extroverted intuiting. It's there as their third function, versus ENFJs are more aware of the physical here and now, and we'll share that. So any questions or observations about that? And as I say, I'm happy to share this slide afterwards. And there's a whole chapter on each of these, obviously, and that's split the difference. So I'd love to have you put in chat for me, please. What are your key learning points from this session and any action ideas you have? Would love as many ideas as possible. This is my way of knowing just the key takeaways. The last sentence was about the third function here, what I call the child function. Yes, thank you, Jean-Luc. Yeah. And in the chapter on Let's Split the Difference, I give a high-level description of John Beebe and his archetype model. If anyone wants to verbally say a key learning point or an action idea, that would be good. Understanding needs and drives. Yes, it's the anchor of temperament and interaction style. It really is. Interaction style was new. It's really a fun lens to look through. I was questioning at the beginning my Introverted thinking, there's my fourth function, and I love it. Key learning, combining temperament and interaction style to clarify type. Yeah, because then you get the triangulation. Playing with differences, yes. More going through interaction styles and temperaments is quicker and easier. And I do have a very complex but thorough training guide that gives a full 2-day program. Unfortunately, it is completely in English. So if anyone's interested in that, it's got slides, it's got the script about how you introduce temperament and then interaction style. And obviously, if you do use any of the activities, feel free, if you could just give credit, that would be good. Thank you. Anything else that you'd like to share? Just waiting for anything else in chat. While I'm waiting for chat. And feel free to reach out. Stepping away from MBTI preferences is a great way to get to best fit type. It really is. In fact, now, as I say, I do this and then build in cognitive processes afterwards. Very interesting, lots of insights. So thank you very much. Stopping sharing now. Thank you for staying late in your evening for your time. Good luck.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, you may, of course.
Yeah, it's a short one. You mentioned the fact that sometimes you see a participant of MBTI session some years after and they don't remember their letters. So did you experiment this method since a long time, and do you have best result or?
Yes, the history, I'll give you the brief history. I started just doing type. Then I went through Linda Barron's programs or preferences. I did preferences and then temperament. Then I thought, no, temperament has to come first. So I did temperament and then type. Then I learned cognitive processes, and then I did temperament, cognitive processes and type. Then I got interaction style, and this was in 2002. I was terrified because I had a group of theorists. It was KPMG, highly educated, sophisticated group. And I'm just doing temperament and interaction style and not telling them what the letters stand for or the cognitive processes. I'm thinking, uh-oh. Loved it. It was part of an influencing program that I did. And they just went, okay, that's good. And I said, well, it happens to correlate to this type preference. Oh, well, that's good. It was, so yeah, 20 years I've been doing it, and I finally got the process down with, a mixture of lots of activities. So I hardly lecture, it's all activities. As you could tell, I do some virtually, but I prefer to do this content live because you see the 3-dimensional element, particularly for interaction style. So, but yes. I don't use an assessment tool because I found for stabilizers particularly, they see the assessment, they say the assessment must be right. Linda Barron wants to say 50% of the time it's wrong on at least one of the 4 preferences because of the contextual inferences. So great. Thank you. Catherine said, really enjoyed it. So thank you. Any other questions? I've been studying this for a long time and happy to talk about it for clarifying types from a different point of view. Any other questions or comments? And thank you, Sylvie and Lionel, for all the work that you did in the background to make this work, because having been president of APTI and organized the conference for BAPT for many years, it is a lot of work. So thank you for that.
And thank you to Malika and Jessica who are behind the scenes translating for everybody to understand. So
amazing. Yes, amazing.